So I want to welcome everybody to CMSWire's very first Google Hangout. It's brand new for us, so please be patient with us. We do the best we can to try to figure out how it all works. We're a little late starting, had some technical difficulties. We thought Rich Blank wasn't going to be able to join us, but he is here on voice, which is great. But unfortunately, Stephen Fishman was having technical difficulties with his sound, so he had to drop out of the Hangout. Our discussion today is all about social business in 2013 and the challenges that organizations are going to face. And it's basically a panel discussion, and we're going to be with Deb Lavoy and Rich Blank. Before we get started on the questions, I'm going to give them a minute to introduce themselves, kind of their 30-second elevator pitch, and we'll start with Deb.
Hi, I'm Deb Lavoy, and I probably should have rehearsed a little self-introduction here, but I'm Director of Marketing Strategy at OpenText, and I have a decades-long fascination with how people work together as teams. I think that we know that there is a magic that happens when great teams form, and we know that it's a catastrophe when teams don't form well, and we're really just learning what the differences are there, and that's what I like to understand and study.
That's great. Rich?
Hello, everyone. My name is Rich Blank, and I'm a solutions engineer with a company called NewsGator, and we build social software. And I've spent basically my entire career focused around collaboration, knowledge management, as well as social computing. And I spend my days talking to customers about, challenges and adoption and, just helping them understand what social is and what it isn't and how to make it successful in their organization.
Great. Both Deb and Rich are columnists at CMSWire, so you can check out all the great insights that they provide over there whenever you want. And they also participate in a lot of our tweet jams, so lots of great insights from them. So let's just get started with the question. The first one we're going to start. In the last couple of years, the main challenges that have surrounded social business today have really focused on culture. But Deb recently wrote an article for CMSWire that kind of pointed to a technology gap that might be an even more important challenge. So our question is, what is the real challenge with social business? Do you want to start, Deb?
Sure. There are a number of very significant challenges with social business, and probably the most important one is understanding what it is. We're working on a significant shift from the notion of an organization as a highly structured command and control environment to something that is much more organic. And there are very significant what I call paradigm shifts, but some people like to think of as cultural shifts involved. But we're spending a lot of time talking about those, and I think not enough time talking about how the technology can help us move forward as well. As we execute this shift, and as we explore this shift from command and control to this more organic form, what we're going from is an organizational design that's actually let people do what people do well, and we need to help get our technology to help us do what people don't do well, managing massive amounts of information, managing complexity, managing the gajillions of different things that we need to do. And I think that we need to ask as much as we're asking the hard questions of our culture, we need to start asking even harder questions of our technology, and just not be satisfied that we've solved social somehow.
Yeah,
Okay.
This is Rich. Yeah, I do agree. I mean, the technology plays a part, right? It has to be easy to use, right? It has to kind of fit seamlessly within a working environment. I think there's an expectation that it has to be kind of pretty and easy, like the consumer world that we all know and love. But the real challenge generally in the workplace is that there is definitely a resistance to change, and how do you get this organization to change? How do you get people to kind of change what they're doing today And you know, as easy as the technology is, it could be attractive at first, but the real problem, you know, really is kind of the integration, and the integration into the user experience, the integration into the flow of work, the integration just in terms of a business process, right? I mean, trying to figure out how to make social a reality in the business world, I think is just that to me is what's key. I mean, you know, water cooler conversations, you know, sharing information, microblogging, those are all good and needed, but there's not a lot of measurable value other than contributions or activities. You really have to kind of expand your thinking and definition of social into knowledge and expertise and innovation to drive real value and integrate it, you know, further within how the business actually gets work done.
I think that one of the big challenges we're looking at with social right now is that it's not really about social. It's the idea that we need to know one another better, we need to be connected to one another, we need to trust each other, we need to be aware of the work of the organization. This is all true. This is all part of social. But what we're really trying to do is to create organizations that are able to be part of and thrive within a vastly more complex world than we've seen before. So the reason that we are undergoing this shift is partially because people want it. It's partly because this democratization of communications has enabled it. But it's also, in very large part, because the old way of doing things is becoming less and less efficient. The idea that efficiencies of scale that 20th century organizations were able to enjoy are diminishing. We are trying to do harder things, we are trying to do more things, and we're trying to do things that are fundamentally, texturally, qualitatively different than what we did before. And we need this different kind of organization enabled by different kinds of technology to be able to execute on that. Usability matters, integration matters, but I think that there are fundamental questions about managing the human complexity interface that we need our technology to support that we haven't even begun to ask the right questions about.
So do you think the term social is part of the problem? Like, I mean, everybody's talking about social business. Nobody really agrees on what that term really means. And when we talk social, everybody thinks blogs, wikis, you know, activity streams. But it's bigger than that. So are we just stuck on that term? Is that kind of what's causing a lot of the problems?
I do think that vocabulary matters a lot. I think you can't have a meaningful conversation, you can't have meaningful intellectual progress, let alone technology progress, without the right vocabulary. And I do feel that we are at a precipice where the vocabulary we currently have is really inadequate to describe what we're doing. The word collaboration, we all know there's so much more within that word that needs to be unpacked, but we don't have a universal language for that. We know that social business is a weird and bothersome term that means sort of everything and nothing at once. Mm-hmm. So I do think that one of the big challenges for 2013 is to develop a vocabulary that we can use to make progress.
Yeah, this is Rich. I mean, I would definitely agree. I mean, you know, what we do is when we approach, you know, an organization, we try to help them and say, you know, what's your social purpose, right? What are you trying to do? What problems are you trying to solve? And, you know, ultimately, you know, you have to let them kind of create their own definition. I mean, social, to sell the word social to an executive is much harder than saying we need to connect people, or we need to manage knowledge better, or we need to build community inside the organization. And when we, you know, dig into it and we talk about, you know, the problems they're trying to solve, it's problems around onboarding people quicker, right? It's around, you know, interacting with their customers and getting product feedback. It's customer support. It's problem resolution. It's finding experts in the organization. So, you know, you can kind of dive into the dive into it and kind of create your own definition, depending on what an organization, what problems the organization is trying to solve.
Okay. I see Stephen Fishman actually managed to join us. Stephen, do you want to kind of add any input into that? I think your audio is no better, Stephen. Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay.
He sounds like Stephen Hawking and not Stephen Fishman.
I was thinking Snoopy.
Snoopy, Charlie Brown's teacher.
I think you're right, Rich. I think that there are some very specific, very tactical use cases and applications of social media that we've been successful with: customer service, social marketing, expertise identification, to a certain extent knowledge management. But I think one of the key things that we need to understand is that we need to be brutally honest with ourselves in terms of how well this stuff is working, and in which use cases. So I believe that social has changed people's minds. I think it's changed people's opportunities. I think it's connected people in ways that have created remarkable value. Having said that, I think that there's an entire new generation of questions that we need to ask. I think there's an opportunity. Oops, that's not good. There's an opportunity to really change the course of business and the course of how people enable business and how business enable people. And we need to be very honest about what's still hard to do, what's easy to do, where are our achievements, where are we still struggling, and we need to ask those questions of ourselves, we need to ask those questions of our businesses, and we need to keep asking those questions of the technology. Because we're trying to develop and sell this technology, we are motivated to say, it's great, and to say, if only you had the magic key, you would be able to take this technology and solve every problem in the universe. But I think that because this is a field where we are learning so dramatically and so quickly, we need to, in some ways, be harder on our technology than we have in the past in terms of the questions and expectations we set for it.
Are you kind of hinting around just the lack of measurement in terms of just the ability that the technology should provide more ability to measure success, or?
I think the technology should be trying to create new opportunities for success. So I recognize that measurement is extremely difficult. We don't know what to measure, we don't know how to measure it, we don't know when to measure it. Got it. We can do it for very specific use cases, and that's good. Mm-hmm. And we're learning all the time, and that's also good. But I mean fundamental things like, for instance, in any given week, I am probably part of, let's say, 20 to 30 different work streams, issues, projects, teams, etc. I think that's probably fairly typical. But understanding the status of all of those things, understanding how they fit together, understanding what the connections are between different ideas, different people, etc., within the organization, mm-hmm. is still extraordinarily difficult. So how is this social technology that I personally have helped to create, and of course many others have too, is that helping me with this problem? And should it be helping me with this problem, and how can it help me with this problem? In other words, we need to push forward what we're demanding of the technology.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. There was our CTO of NewsGator posted a blog on our NewsGator blog, on a company blog on our website, and it was talking about that, about all the different streams of information and how the social technology needs to be smarter right? How it needs to be more intelligent, how it needs to look at, you know, the underlying data and bring all that together and actually, you know, help you, you know, manage those streams of information better and just be more intelligent. And that's definitely, I think, you know, future focus, right? In terms of, you know, getting people to use these tools is one thing, but once you start getting them to use it, we're collecting all that rich data, right? You have to have data, right? That big data under the covers. And then once you have that, then you can begin to connect the dots and analyze that data and then make it more intelligent or have, you know, less thinking for the user. And the system can do more thinking for you.
So
right.
People, we're really good at thinking. We're really good at identifying and creating patterns. We are good at intuiting. We're good at feeling. We're good at caring about things. Creativity. We're not as good at tracking tons of information. Computers, good at tracking tons of information. So how are we using our technology to support and enhance what we can do?
No, that's you know, I think that's, you know, definitely where this is all going. But to get there, right, you need the data, right? You need to capture it. You need to get people using it, right? And that's the key, right? Driving adoption, right? To get people to change. And once they start using it and realize that there's value in it, and it becomes part of a workflow or a process, and we're capturing all this great activities, right? All the you know, then you can begin to measure it better and begin to, you know, provide more intelligence about who should be notified when, and, you know, connecting that, you know, shouldn't know that I have a meeting, my calendar is full of meetings tomorrow, so maybe it shouldn't alert me, right? I mean, it should be all connected. So, you know,
without being creepy.
Yeah, right, without
which is another big challenge, right?
Right, big brother, right? Big brother's watching.
So, do you think that we've spent so much?
Uh-oh.
I think we lost her.
We lost the moderator.
No, I'm back.
Okay.
You see me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So my question was, are we focusing so much on usability with the technology that we're not kind of thinking about all the underlying things that need to happen underneath to make it all work together? Or, like, I mean, we're so concerned about getting adoption to use it. So are we focusing all of our attention on usability and design and not enough on what to do with it once we actually have all the information when people start to use it?
I don't think that you can point to any. This is a braid of things. All of these things are enmeshed together, and there's no value. Design, in terms of usability, in terms of what people call design thinking, are all critical parts of this. But there's, I have something I like to say about usability, which is that people will use a tool when it's easier to use than not to. So if our adoption is flagging, what part of that equation needs to change? Stephen, why don't you type your question?
You can type it, and we can.
Yeah, that would be better.
So I don't think it's usability. I don't think it's underlying capability, and I don't think it's culture. Any of those things alone. It's those things in lockstep. In other words, you can't focus on one and ignore the others.
So it just goes back to what people, process, technology. Back to the what's always been true about implementing new technology in an organization. I mean, there was, so I think there was an article on CMSWire the other day that somebody's talking about what would SAP do, and right where you would never implement SAP without some change management or some focus on people and process and why is it that we're now trying to implement these social tools and not trying to do the same thing? Everybody wants it quick and easy and not actually focusing on the real value and the real change.
Okay. Stephen's asking, how much are we bundling design into the technology label? Is it purposeful bundling? For example, is the design of a form of technology for the purpose of your premise?
I personally think that really great design is an exploration of value and purpose that can have very profound impact on what we do and how we understand things. And so a lot of people like a lot of the words we're using, like social design. These are words that people bring and imbue meaning into. We don't have great objective definitions for them. But I think, so there's a few things here. One is, how well have we done with what we understand about social so far? And how much leadership is necessary, how much technology is necessary, how much change management is necessary to make that work? But there's another level of question, which is, are we actually yet asking the right or enough of the right questions for this technology yet?
How do you know? Like, I mean, we ask the questions, but how do you know how do you know if you are or you aren't asking the right questions?
And I think that this speaks to being honest about what's working and what's not. While we have a wide variety of challenges in terms of measuring ROI, in large part because, without having a clear definition of what you're trying to measure, it's extremely difficult to measure it. Also, when you're talking about a paradigm shift, it's not like you're comparing apples to apples where it's easy to measure the delta. You're measuring apples to chinchillas. It's not, the formula doesn't hold anymore. So what we need, but when we use these tools, we have an intuitive understanding. At OpenText, we recently deployed our own software internally. And we can look at it and say it's an amazing success. We can also look at it and say, oh my God, we've uncovered all of these amazing gaps as well. And the courage to have that important conversation about, okay, what has this done well and what problems is this completely sidestepping, not getting to the heart of it all. We need to be honest about those conversations. We need to rush into them with the joy and excitement of discovery, the same joy and excitement of discovery into the challenges as we are to the successes. And that takes some guts, because people get mad if you talk about things not working. People get mad if you try to criticize either the organization or the technology, and we've got to move past that. We've got to embrace the bad along with the good, because that's the only way we're going to be able to make serious progress here in the next couple of years.
Deb, I'm curious about that, because I've heard you say before that the ability to fail, you have to open yourself up to the chance to fail, wasn't the right term for that. You had that in one of your articles, and I'm curious what would be the way to think about that.
So failure is not a good word, right? We don't like to think about failing. And in fact, you're not, when you are looking at something that's not working, you're not looking at a failure. You're looking, it sounds hackneyed, but you are looking at an opportunity.
Okay.
I think that the dominant culture in Western business is a culture of fear. That's what command and control is, to its benefit and to its detriment. That we set certain expectations, and if you meet them, it's good, and if you don't meet them, it's bad. And so everybody is encouraged to create and propagate only good news. We instinctively look away from things that aren't right because we don't want to take responsibility from them, and so for them. So what we need to do is we need to separate the idea of personal responsibility, personal failure, from stuff that's working and that's not working. And we have to understand that if something's not working, it's not because somebody's lazy or stupid or incompetent. Not that those things never happen, but assuming that you, for the most part, don't hire and work with idiots, and really we try to avoid that for the most part, the reason things don't work aren't because of human mistakes. And it is a tendency of business to say all mistakes are human mistakes. But that's not true. The mistakes are very often fundamentally about how we frame and understand problems, how we frame and understand our technology, how we frame and understand our approaches to problems. And so if we take the idea that, if something doesn't work, it's because somebody screwed up off the table, it makes it a lot easier to actually have a productive conversation about it. And it takes the, I didn't do it, not me, I didn't screw up. You get rid of that, and you can have a much more productive conversation about what to do next and about how to create the next opportunity.
Yeah, just to kind of build on that, I mean, one of the things that I've seen, our customers do and organizations that have been successful, I mean, they definitely tend to focus on, the culture and trying to influence the right kind of behavior rather than the technology. And and it ultimately, it starts out as an IT project, right, social, but ultimately the most successful ones have tried to get the business folks to own this and make them part of this, where, if it fails, right, or if there's an issue, right, the business folks, using it, they own it, right, they own the success or failure. So, nobody's really to blame but themselves, right, when if it doesn't quite meet the expectations that were set out there. So it's definitely, who owns these tools, right, who owns the deployment of that, and is it the business, is it IT, and or is it jointly shared?
Yeah, Rich, you are so right. I've been involved in probably 50 to 100 deployments of social technologies in one way or another at this point. And the most successful deployments I've seen are actually driven by the CEO. I can think of about 5 or 6 different instances where the CIO, and maybe it's more than this actually, the CEO turns to the CIO and says, "Get this done because I care about this." Those are the ones that actually really work.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I mean, we generally with social, right, you see kind of it start bottom up. There's pockets out there, but once the executive team gets on board, once it becomes part of your, a strategy, or, the key performance indicators, or part of the executive suite, the C-level folks, obviously they really drive that change. And, once your boss is on it, or the CEO is on it, everybody else tends to kind of follow.
Yep. The be there because your boss is there, and this is not a nice word either, but the coercive effect of moving executive communications exclusively into the social space has some magical effects on adoption.
But yeah, but to go back to your point, right? To do that, right, the technology piece has to be, right, bulletproof, right? It needs to be, it needs to be pretty seamless. That, if it's not, and the executive was on the road traveling, right, and they can't get to it, or it's not part of their day-to-day work, and it's not easy to use, then they won't use it.
I think that's one level of problem, right? That's one level of challenge. If we think about social as a way for the organization to be more of a community, our technology is in the ballpark of doing a good job at that, right? We have a lot of good technologies. There are, we've got 2 or 3 gajillion potential vendors who have technology that's pretty decent to do that. And if we're talking about that issue, then cultural issues probably are some of the dominant issues in terms of getting people to adopt these things. if we're looking at saying, okay, good, the organization is connected, how do we then transform from a command and control organization that can handle X level of complexity to an organic structure that can handle a vastly greater level of complexity that can achieve qualitatively and quantitatively dramatically different results? Those are the real kinds of questions I'm asking. How can we get our technology to take us from, oh, isn't it nice that we're talking to one another, to amplifying our human capabilities dramatically?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's somewhat of a, I wouldn't say a management philosophy, but I mean, it's the great CEOs, the great companies out there, right? They have, that leader, right? That passionate leader who's out there kind of inspiring people, and they have certain values, right, within the organization that kind of resonate of how they people treat each other and how they work. And I mean, these tools obviously just enhance that, right? But in the absence of that, and in the absence of a, kind of a command, or, when you have that command and control environment, there is some level of fear. I mean, we work with a lot of financial customers, just because of security compliance, concerns, and they do things, on premise and use our stuff there. But in those environments, you'd be surprised. I mean, they're pretty traditional, somewhat top-down organizations, but they've been some of the first organizations to adopt this technology and try to figure out ways to leverage it and see about, how do we actually begin to measure this? How do we integrate it, social within a business process, and look for efficiencies and productivity gains, because executives are looking for that. So, I mean, I think there's a recognition that there's a need to change, but obviously they're pretty complicated organizations, multiple lines of business. That takes time.
So we've got about 5 minutes, a little bit less left, and I just want to ask you guys one last question. And I think you've kind of already, really, in a way, already answered it. But it's more so we've talked about technology and social being